I'm Lauren. I'm the head coach here at WillSpace, and today we're going to review the 3 stretches that I think are most frequently done incorrectly and how to do them correctly. The first one we're working on today is the quintessential yoga posture of downward dog. But in a downward dog, there are a lot of things to think about. It's much more complicated than just the pose you do during your yoga class. For a downward dog, to set up, start in a plank, hands forward, feet back, and the feet are hip width distance apart for this. Squeeze your butt, make sure your shoulders are over your wrists and that your back is nice and neutral. Bend your knees, keep your heels lifted, lift the hips. If you're more advanced, you can start to work on straightening the legs, but there's a lot to consider when doing that in a downward dog position. The first thing I want to think about in the downward dog is why I bend my knees. If I just shoot my hips straight back, I will accidentally arch them. More often than not, if you try and push into a downward dog with straight legs, you'll end up arching your hips. That's no good in this position. So take a second to bend your knees, keep your butt squeezing, and keep your back flat. From this position here, I want to make sure my armpits are facing each other, so the shoulders are turning in or externally rotating. My hands are nice and flat, and if I go to extend my legs, nothing should change in the upper half of my body. Boom. You don't need to have your heels down, that just depends on your hamstring length. And this position here with the back flat and the shoulders extended is a perfect downward dog. Moving towards this in time. Things that go wrong in a downward dog, there's a lot of them. The first thing that goes wrong in a downward dog usually is we push too hard into the shoulders. So if you see someone doing a beautiful extended downward dog and your choice to emulate that is to push into your shoulders as hard as you can, this is actually no good. What I'm doing here is internally rotating my shoulders or turning my armpits out instead of turning my armpits in. And that actually causes a lot of pressure at the front of your shoulder. So before you lift up into your downward dog, imagine you've got eyeballs in your armpits, try and make them look at each other and keep them facing that direction so your shoulders stay safe. The second most common thing done wrong, as we mentioned, is straightening the legs too soon. If I straighten my legs too soon, a couple of things can go wrong. 1, I can arch my back. 2, my shoulders might not get into the right spot. And 3, I've lost all the nice benefits of this position by just trying to force my heels down to the ground. In this position, if you bend your legs, tuck your butt, and lift your hips from your spine, now I'm in a much more neutral spinal alignment. For pretty much anyone, regardless of your level, you can do this movement every single day. For a beginner, work on that back and forth sensation to start to learn how to keep your hips aligned. So find your plank, squeeze your butt, bend your knees, hips up, shoulders to ears, count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, shift back into your plank. You can do that about 5 times for maybe 3 sets every single day. For a more advanced downward dog practitioner, for a more advanced stretch, set up the same way, bend, extend, work on squeezing your legs and slowly extending the back heels down. You can hold this position for anywhere from, let's say, 90 seconds to up to even 5 or so minutes, accumulating the time or seeing how long you can spend in this position before you have to take a break. To come out, go back to your plank, knees down, and relax. Pigeon pose, another one of the most commonly performed and most misunderstood stretches. To come into a proper pigeon position, start by taking one foot, bring it in front like you're gonna go into a lunge, and have your foot aligned with your back knee. Your balance might be a little bit funny, that's super normal. Place your hands outside your feet, tuck your back toes, and lift your knee. From here, keep the outside edge of your foot on the ground, even the heel. Start to open up the knee to the side, drop the hips with the knee. If you look at this position, my hips and knee should always be in one line. My front shin here is parallel, and I'm working towards eventually pressing everything flat to the ground. Once you're lower, you can untuck your back foot. Common mistakes in pigeon pose. The most common mistake in pigeon pose is putting the knee down too quickly. So most people tuck the foot in tight, put the knee on the ground, and hold here. Sometimes you'll even see people shift forward. All of this actually takes you out of the most effective part of the stretch, which is stretching your piriformis, or basically just stretching your butt cheek, right? So with the pigeon pose, if your hips are tighter, rather than forcing your knee to the ground, keep the knee elevated. Open up the knee. Once you feel as though you can't move any further, put your back knee down and hold here. This now has my hips and my knee in a much safer alignment. I'm getting a much more direct external opening stretch in my hip, and it also is keeping my hip and knee safer. Another common mistake in the pigeon pose is allowing the heel to lift up. If you come forward and the knee starts to do this and the heel lifts, once again, we're coming out of that good external rotation stretch in the hip. Most important thing is feeling that good butt stretch. So make sure no matter what in your pigeon, hip and front knee stay in about the same line, wherever that is in your mobility. Things to watch out for: pointing the front foot, or the wrong angle of the shin. The shin is dipping in instead of staying parallel to the front of my body. Also watch if the knee is all the way on the floor and the hip is not. I've lost alignment somewhere from here. To fix this, make sure you flex your front foot and keep the knee lifted in line with the hips until you're ready to put them on the floor together. Modifications for pigeon pose if you're doing this at home. Personally, I like blocks. You don't need to have blocks necessarily at home, but you can have books or a blanket or a pillow or something else that will help to prop up your leg. Take the block, 1 or 2, depending on how tight your leg feels. Place your thigh on top of the block with the knee slightly off. Align the shin so it's parallel in front of you. Slide the leg back. This helps me now keep my knee elevated without necessarily me putting pressure in my arms to stay up, and I can focus on keeping my hips square to front and stay in this nice pigeon position. A movement like this is something to be done every single day. For beginners, hold this position however high you need to be with the chest and hips up for about 90 seconds total on each side. If you're a more advanced pigeon practitioner, you can make it active by keeping the back leg up, moving into the active stretch, and coming back up to your starting lunge position. For an active pigeon movement like this, work towards about 10 to 20 reps on each side, holding the last one in the stretch anywhere from 10 to 20 seconds. Another very commonly misunderstood stretch, especially if you are a cycler, a spinner, or a runner, is the bent vertical lunge, which is also called the quad stretch on the wall or the quad stretch on the knee. For this position, keep your blocks close by, take your foot that you're stretching, bring the foot up the wall, and have about 6 to 12 inches of distance between you and the wall. From here, hands to blocks. The other foot comes out in front of you, so you make a 90-degree angle on the front leg. Take your blocks by your hips, not your foot, by your hips. Lean your chest back so it's in line with your back knee, and squeeze your butt as hard as you can. You should feel the stretch in your quad all the way up into your hip extender, and hold here, chest tall, ribs in, squeezing your butt the whole time. The most common mistake with the quad stretch on the knee is pushing the knee all the way to the wall. To do this properly, you would need to be able to flatten your entire body to the wall. Unfortunately, I'm a pretty flexible person to be able to do this, but I will admit, most people can't. If you come into a position and you can't lift your chest all the way up, your knee is too far back. We want the shoulder and the knee to be in the same line. So move your foot away from the wall as much as you need to, that we can find this nice tall alignment, shoulder, hip, and knee. Another common mistake in this position, wherever the back knee is having the front foot too extended. This encourages us, again, to push too far into this stretch right? So we're losing the hip stretch completely, or it gives you not as much stability as we would like in a position that requires a lot of attention. So make sure front foot stays directly under the knee and the back knee is far enough away from the wall that you can keep your chest up, butt tucked, ribs back. Last mistake, tilting the hips up or down. You want your hips to be as even and tucked as possible. This particular stretch, over time, you can work towards getting that leg a little bit flatter, but in the meantime, keep the knee back, hands in line with hips, and squeeze your butt. This is something you can do, again, about 90 seconds on each side every day. Best to be done, I would say 3 times a week at the most.